The living room was dim, lit only by the fading orange glow from the window. Madison Hayes, 7 months pregnant, clutched her swollen belly as she tried to steady her breath. Her heart pounded, not from the baby's kicks, but from the heavy footsteps echoing down the hall. Jason Miller, her husband, reeked of alcohol and rage, his hands clenched into fists, his eyes wild with fury. "You think you can say no to me, Madison?" Jason's voice cracked like a whip. "I asked for money. Where is it?" Madison's voice trembled, almost a whisper. "Jason, we don't have any left. I saved it for the baby. Please, stop shouting, the neighbors." Before she could finish, Jason stormed into the room, his face twisted in anger. He grabbed a metal pipe he had been using earlier to fix the broken railing. With terrifying speed, he raised it high above his head. Madison gasped, stumbling backward, her body heavy with the weight of her unborn child. "You're useless," Jason roared, bringing the pipe down hard. The sound of metal striking bone echoed through the house. Madison screamed, collapsing to the floor as white-hot pain shot through her leg. Her vision blurred. She felt the sting of tears mixing with sweat. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to protect her unborn baby. She curled instinctively, holding her stomach with both arms as her leg throbbed in agony. Outside, the peaceful suburban neighborhood of Houston, Texas, remained quiet, unaware of the horror unfolding inside the Hayes home. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere, a car door slammed. But inside, time slowed to a nightmare. Jason stood over Madison, his chest heaving. "Don't ever cross me again," he growled, lowering the pipe, ready to strike once more. Madison's mind raced. She thought of the baby, of survival. If he hit her stomach, it would be over. She forced herself to move, dragging her broken leg against the carpet, desperate to reach the phone on the coffee table. Every inch felt like a mile. Jason noticed. He kicked the table, sending the phone skidding across the floor out of reach. "You'll never leave me, Madison. Never," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. Madison sobbed, clutching her belly tighter, praying for a miracle. She thought of her brother Michael, the one person who always promised to protect her. But Michael was far away, working his late shift as a police officer. There was no one here now. Jason raised the pipe again, his shadow falling over her trembling body. The baby shifted inside her as if sensing the danger. Madison squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the final blow, her lips whispering a broken plea. But just as the pipe came down, a loud crash erupted from the front door. Heavy boots pounded against the hardwood floor, and a familiar voice bellowed with fury. "Get away from my sister, Jason," before the nightmare of bruises and broken bones. Madison Hayes once believed in love stories. She was the kind of woman who laughed easily, who carried warmth like sunlight, and who cared for others before herself. At 29, she was a dedicated nurse at a community clinic in Houston, known for holding her patients' hands a little longer, listening when no one else would. Life had not been perfect, but Madison made the best of it. She grew up in a small house with her older brother, Michael. Their father had left when they were young, so Michael stepped in as the protector of the family. Madison admired his courage when he joined the Marines, and later when he returned home to serve as a police officer. For years it was just the two of them and their mother. Madison promised herself she would one day build the kind of stable family they never had. That dream seemed to come true the night she met Jason Miller. He was charming then, handsome, confident, the kind of man who could light up a room. At a friend's barbecue, Jason had walked right up to her, offering her a plate of food and an easy smile. He asked about her work, her hobbies, her dreams. He made her feel seen in a way she had longed for. In the beginning, Jason brought flowers to her clinic, waited for her after late shifts, and told her she deserved to be treated like a queen. Madison, who had always cared for others, felt overwhelmed to finally be cared for. When he proposed after a year of dating, she said yes, through tears of joy, believing her life was falling into place. The wedding was small but beautiful. Madison wore a lace gown her mother helped her pick, and Jason whispered promises in her ear as they danced under fairy lights. "I'll protect you forever. You'll never have to be afraid," he had said. Madison believed every word, but promises can rot quickly. Within months of marriage, Jason's mask slipped. The first time he raised his voice, Madison thought it was stress. The first time he shoved her, he apologized with tears, saying it would never happen again. She wanted to believe him, so she forgave him. Each time, the cycle repeated: anger, violence, regret, gifts, and hollow apologies. By the time Madison discovered she was pregnant, the abuse had grown worse. She hid bruises beneath long sleeves at the clinic, smiled through tears when neighbors asked how she was doing, and told Michael everything was fine. She didn't want to burden her brother, who was already carrying the weight of protecting others every day as a police officer. But deep inside, Madison was breaking. Every night, she whispered to her unborn baby, promising she would find a way to keep them safe. She prayed Jason would change, prayed the love she once believed in would return. Yet each morning, she woke to a harsher reality. The man she married was not her savior. He was her tormentor. And now, lying on the floor with her leg shattered, Madison knew she had been wrong all along. The Jason who once swore to protect her had become the very monster she feared most. But what Jason didn't know was that Madison wasn't alone anymore. Her brother had just come home. The Hayes home sat in a quiet Houston suburb, lined with oak trees and manicured lawns. From the outside, it looked like the perfect place to raise a family. Neighbors waved to each other while mowing their lawns, children rode bicycles in the cul-de-sac, and dogs barked behind white picket fences. On weekends, families gathered for backyard barbecues, laughter filling the air. To anyone driving past, the little beige one-story house on Elmwood Drive seemed ordinary, safe, even welcoming. But behind its walls, the truth was much darker. Madison's house had become a prison. The curtains stayed drawn most of the day, keeping out both sunlight and curious glances. The flower beds she once tended with pride were overgrown with weeds. The porch light that used to shine warmly each night often stayed off, casting the house into shadows. Neighbors whispered sometimes, wondering why Madison rarely joined block parties anymore, or why Jason's truck came and went at odd hours. Inside, the contrast was even sharper. The living room smelled faintly of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Empty bottles cluttered the counter, and bills stacked unopened on the kitchen table. The walls, once decorated with framed wedding photos and Madison's cheerful touch, now seemed cold. A crack in the drywall from one of Jason's violent outbursts remained unpatched, a silent witness to the chaos. Madison had tried to keep some normalcy. She folded baby clothes carefully in the nursery, painted the walls a soft pastel blue, and placed a rocking chair by the window. That room was her sanctuary, the only place where she could dream of a future filled with laughter and innocence. But each time Jason stormed through the door, even the nursery felt fragile, like a bubble about to burst. The neighborhood itself added to the painful contrast. On the same street, a young couple often pushed their newborn in a stroller, their joy evident in every smile. Madison would watch from the window, one hand on her belly, and wonder if her child would ever know such peace. She longed for safety, for the kind of life she thought she had chosen when she married Jason. Instead, she found herself locked in fear, praying no one outside would hear the shouting or the crashes that echoed through the walls. Michael knew something was wrong, though Madison kept assuring him everything was fine. As a police officer, he had seen the signs in other families, the avoidance, the excuses, the long sleeves in summer. Each time he visited, Madison smiled too brightly, and Jason stayed just out of reach, watching like a hawk. The house gave Michael a bad feeling, though he didn't yet know how deep the darkness inside had grown. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the suburban street grew quiet, the perfect picture cracked wide open. Neighbors setting down their dinner forks froze when they heard Madison's scream pierce the stillness. Curtains twitched as eyes peeked out, confusion spreading. The house that looked so ordinary from the outside was now a stage for a nightmare no one could ignore. And just as the silence broke, heavy boots thundered inside. Michael had arrived. Jason Miller was not always a monster, at least not on the surface. When Madison first met him, he was the kind of man who drew people in. Confident smile, easy laughter, strong hands that made her feel secure. But behind that charm was a dangerous hunger he never revealed until it was too late. Jason grew up in Houston too, the son of a factory worker who drowned his failures in whiskey. Violence was a language Jason learned early, watching his father throw bottles against the wall and his mother cover bruises with makeup. Instead of breaking the cycle, Jason carried it with him. He hid it well at first, masking the anger with quick wit and a charming grin. Madison fell for that mask, not realizing the darkness behind it. The spiral began with money. Jason loved the thrill of gambling. At first it was small, weekend poker games with friends, the occasional trip to a casino. Madison thought it was harmless fun, but soon the games turned into obsession. He spent nights at underground poker houses, chasing wins that never lasted. When the losses piled up, so did his temper. Drinking followed. Jason found comfort at the bottom of a bottle, and the man who once whispered sweet promises began slurring insults instead. He blamed Madison for his failures, accusing her of not supporting him enough, of not understanding his struggles. Each insult chipped away at the foundation of their marriage. Then came the violence. The first shove was followed by a tearful apology. The first slap came with flowers the next day. Madison wanted to believe him when he said it would never happen again. But Jason was a master of the cycle. Rage, regret, gifts, repeat. And with each turn, the violence grew worse. By the time Madison was pregnant, Jason was drowning in debt. Loan sharks began calling, threatening, demanding payment. Jason turned his fury on the only person within reach, Madison. He demanded money from her savings, money she had carefully set aside for the baby's future. When she refused, he saw it not as protection, but as betrayal. Jason's arrogance made him believe he still had control. To the outside world, he was a hard-working husband, maybe a little rough around the edges, but nothing more. He fooled neighbors with quick nods and short conversations. He even charmed Madison's mother during Sunday dinners. But behind closed doors, he was a tyrant, ruling the house with fists and fear. What Jason didn't realize was that the walls were closing in. His debts were deeper than he admitted, his mistress was losing patience with his empty promises, and Madison, though terrified, was beginning to see through the lies. Jason thought he had broken her, but deep inside, Madison's spirit remained unshattered. That night, as he stood with a pipe in his hand, Jason believed he still held all the power. But outside, headlights were pulling into the driveway. Someone who had no fear of him was about to walk through the door. And when Jason turned toward the sound, his worst nightmare was standing there. Michael, the brother who would never forgive. The crash of the front door echoed like thunder through the quiet suburban street. Michael Hayes, his police badge glinting under the porch light, stormed inside with fury burning in his eyes. He had heard his sister's screams from the driveway, screams that sliced through the evening air like sirens. He didn't even bother to knock. He knew something terrible was happening. The scene before him was worse than he could have imagined. Madison lay on the carpet, clutching her swollen belly with one hand while her other arm stretched weakly toward the phone. Her leg bent at an unnatural angle, her face pale from shock. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she struggled to breathe through the pain. Jason stood over her, still gripping the metal pipe, his chest heaving with rage. He froze when he saw Michael, but only for a moment. His jaw tightened and he sneered. "This isn't your business, Michael. Stay out of it." Michael's blood boiled. "Not my business? She's my sister. She's 7 months pregnant, Jason. What the hell have you done?" His voice thundered through the house, shaking the walls more than Jason's violence ever had. Outside, the neighborhood was stirring. The scream, the crash, the shouting, it had drawn attention. Curtains parted as neighbors peeked from their windows. A woman across the street stepped onto her porch, phone in hand, whispering urgently into it. Another neighbor pulled his children back inside, his face pale as he realized the truth. The Hayes home was no safe haven. Jason tried to regain control, his voice dripping with arrogance. "She belongs to me. She doesn't get to run to you every time she doesn't like the rules. Put your badge away and get out of my house." Michael's hand twitched toward his holster, but he held back. He wasn't here in uniform, he was here as a brother. His eyes locked on Madison, who lay trembling, her lips mouthing words he could barely hear. "Help me." That was all he needed. Michael lunged forward, knocking the pipe from Jason's hand with a swift strike. The weapon clattered across the floor, landing near the doorway. Jason stumbled back, caught off guard by the ferocity of Michael's attack. For once, he wasn't the strongest man in the room. Madison sobbed in relief, reaching for her brother's arm as he knelt beside her. "It's okay, Maddie. I'm here now." "He's not going to hurt you anymore," Michael whispered, though his eyes never left Jason. The neighbors outside gathered closer, their whispers turning into gasps as shadows moved behind the thin curtains. They could see everything now. Jason's posture stiff with fury, Michael standing tall in defense of his sister, and Madison broken on the floor. One neighbor finally said what everyone else was thinking. "Should we call the cops?" The woman on her porch answered without hesitation. "They're already on their way." Jason's face twisted with panic for the first time. He looked at the growing crowd outside, at Michael's unyielding stance, and at Madison's terrified but determined eyes. For once, the walls of his house weren't protecting his secrets. And as the sound of sirens wailed faintly in the distance, Jason realized his world was about to come crashing down. 2. The flashing red and blue lights painted the quiet street as paramedics rushed into the Hayes home. Madison's sobs mixed with the wail of the siren as she was lifted carefully onto a stretcher. Her leg was twisted, her face pale, and her arms clutched her belly protectively. Michael held her hand the entire way out, his jaw clenched, fury still boiling beneath his calm exterior. "Stay with me, Maddie. I'm right here," he whispered, trying to steady her breathing. But Madison's eyes fluttered, tears slipping down her cheeks as fear swallowed her whole. The ride to the hospital felt endless. Every bump in the road sent sharp waves of pain through Madison's leg. She kept whispering to her unborn baby, "Please stay safe. Please don't leave me," over and over like a prayer. The paramedic reassured her, checking the baby's heartbeat with quick, practiced hands. "The baby's strong. Just focus on breathing, ma'am. We'll get you there." When they arrived, the emergency room burst into motion. Nurses rushed Madison into trauma care, cutting away her blood-stained jeans, stabilizing her leg, and hooking her up to monitors. Michael paced outside the curtain, fists clenched, every muscle in his body screaming to do more. He was a police officer, used to controlling situations, but tonight he felt helpless watching his sister in pain. Inside, Madison fought to stay awake. The bright lights, the sharp antiseptic smell, the rush of voices, it all felt distant, like she was floating away. Her mind flashed with images of Jason's rage, the pipe coming down, the betrayal in his eyes. She wanted to scream, but her voice was gone. All she could do was cry silently as the doctors worked around her. "Her vitals are stable," one nurse said, glancing at the monitor. "The baby's heart rate looks good. We'll need x-rays on that leg." Relief should have washed over Madison, but it didn't. Instead, a crushing wave of despair hit her. She had spent months convincing herself she could endure Jason's anger, that he would change for the baby. And now here she was, broken, humiliated, exposed in front of strangers. She felt weak, ashamed, and trapped in a nightmare with no escape. Michael finally stepped inside, crouching beside her bed. He took her trembling hand, his eyes softer now. "You don't have to be strong anymore, Maddie. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm not letting him hurt you again." Her lips quivered as she whispered, "I should have left sooner. I thought I could fix him. I thought he loved me." Michael shook his head firmly. "That man doesn't know love. But you're not alone anymore. I promise you, he's going to pay for everything he's done." Madison's tears spilled freely. She wanted to believe him, but fear lingered like a shadow. She closed her eyes, holding her stomach as the baby kicked gently, a reminder of the life she had to protect. For the first time, she admitted to herself what she had been denying for months. Jason wasn't just a mistake. He was a danger. And if she didn't find the courage to break free, this cycle would never end. But what Madison couldn't imagine was that her life was about to change forever, because someone unexpected was about to walk into her world. The sterile hallway of the hospital smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Madison lay in her room, her legs stabilized in a heavy cast, the rhythmic beeping of monitors filling the silence. Michael had stepped out briefly to speak with detectives about Jason's arrest, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Exhaustion weighed her down, but sleep never came. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jason's face twisted in rage. A soft knock at the door startled her. Madison turned her head, expecting another nurse, but instead, a tall man in a tailored navy suit stood in the doorway. His presence immediately filled the room. Not loud or overbearing, but calm, commanding, almost protective. His dark hair was neatly combed, his gray eyes sharp yet kind. "Sorry to intrude," he said gently. "The nurse mentioned you might need some extra support. I'm Alexander Reed." Madison frowned, confused. The name was familiar. Of course it was. Alexander Reed wasn't just anyone. He was one of Houston's most prominent businessmen, a billionaire in the tech world whose face often appeared on magazine covers and charity events. What was he doing here? Seeing her hesitation, Alexander stepped inside slowly. "I know this seems strange. I wasn't looking to bother you, but I happened to be here visiting a foundation project in the hospital. I overheard some of the staff talking about what happened. I couldn't walk away." His voice carried no judgment, only genuine concern. Madison shifted uncomfortably, tugging the blanket higher over her chest. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice raw. "I don't even know you." Alexander nodded respectfully. "You're right. But I know what it looks like when someone is carrying more than they should. And I can see it in your eyes. You've been fighting alone for far too long." His words pierced through her defenses, stirring emotions she didn't want to show. Tears filled Madison's eyes again, uninvited and unstoppable. She quickly looked away, embarrassed to cry in front of a stranger. Alexander didn't press. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sat quietly, giving her space. After a moment, he spoke again, softer this time. "I've seen broken families. My ex-wife left me years ago. Money doesn't shield you from pain, but what I've learned is this. You can't stay in the fire hoping it'll stop burning. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away." Madison's heart clenched. For months she had carried shame, believing she had failed by not fixing Jason. But here was a man, powerful beyond anything she could imagine, telling her that leaving wasn't weakness. It was survival. She studied him carefully. He wasn't pitying her. He wasn't trying to lecture her. He was offering something she hadn't felt in years: respect. Before she could respond, the door burst open again. Michael entered, still in his police uniform, eyes narrowing as he spotted Alexander. Protective as always, he barked. "Who are you, and why are you with my sister?" Alexander rose calmly, extending a hand. "Alexander Reed, I'm here because your sister deserves someone in her corner." Michael didn't shake his hand. He stared at the billionaire with suspicion, torn between gratitude and distrust. And in that charged moment, Madison realized her life was about to take a turn she never saw coming. The days following the attack blurred together. Madison remained in the hospital, her leg immobilized, her body healing slowly, while her mind wrestled with heavier wounds. Nurses came and went, checking her vitals, adjusting her medications, but every night she lay awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by Jason's shadow. Michael visited constantly, always hovering, always protective. He wanted to talk about charges, court hearings, restraining orders, but Madison's heart wasn't ready for legal battles. She was still just trying to breathe. Alexander Reed, however, was different. He visited quietly, never staying long, never pushing. Sometimes he brought flowers, nothing extravagant, just simple daisies. Sometimes he brought books or a smoothie the nurses approved of for her pregnancy. He never made grand gestures. Instead, he sat in the chair by her bed, speaking when she wanted to talk, staying silent when she didn't. Still, Madison kept her guard up. "Why are you here?" she asked one afternoon, her voice sharp with suspicion. "You don't even know me. Billionaires don't just show up for strangers in hospitals." Alexander leaned back, his gray eyes steady. "You're right. Most don't. But I'm not here because of your situation. I'm here because of you. The way you hold your baby when you're scared, the way you apologize to the nurses even while you're in pain, it says everything. You deserve someone to remind you you're worth protecting." His words unsettled her. No one had spoken to her that way in years. Jason's voice had drowned out her worth, making her believe she was weak, a failure. Could she really trust this man who appeared out of nowhere? Michael certainly didn't. He watched Alexander like a hawk, interrogating him with every chance he got. "What's your angle? You're rich, powerful, and used to getting what you want. Don't think for a second I'll let you take advantage of my sister." Alexander never flinched under Michael's glare. "I don't want anything from her," he replied calmly, "except the chance to remind her she's not alone." Despite herself, Madison felt her defenses soften. She noticed the small things, how Alexander always looked her in the eye, how he never touched her without asking, how he respected Michael's role instead of challenging it. Slowly, the fear that every man was another Jason began to fade, replaced by cautious hope. One evening, Madison confessed in a trembling voice, "I'm scared, Alexander. Not just of Jason, but of trusting anyone again. I can't make another mistake. My baby deserves better than that." Alexander nodded, his expression earnest. "Fear is proof that you care. But don't confuse Jason's cruelty with your failure. You loved the wrong man, Madison. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. And whoever has the privilege of standing beside you next will have to prove they're worthy." Tears welled in her eyes as she absorbed his words. For the first time, she didn't feel judged. She felt understood. But before she could answer, Michael walked in carrying papers. His face was grim, his voice heavy. "Maddie, we need to talk. Jason isn't done yet." And in that moment, Madison realized her nightmare wasn't over. The fight was only beginning. Jason Miller might have been dragged away in handcuffs that night, but prison walls didn't erase his anger. If anything, they sharpened it. From the holding cell, he made phone calls, his voice dripping with venom. To Madison, he left threatening messages before Michael had her number changed. To his so-called friends, he demanded they keep an eye on her. Even behind bars, Jason refused to let go of his control. Madison's days in the hospital grew tense. At first, she thought she could finally breathe, finally heal in peace. But then the letters started arriving. Sloppy handwriting, filled with rage, promising revenge. "You can't hide from me," one read. "That baby is mine, and you're nothing without me." Nurses found her trembling with the paper clenched in her hands, tears streaming down her face. Michael exploded when he saw them. "He's taunting you. He thinks he still owns you. But I swear, Maddie, I'll make sure he never lays a finger on you again." His protective instincts went into overdrive. He spoke with prosecutors, demanded restraining orders, and stationed officers near the hospital for extra security. Still, Madison couldn't shake the fear. Jason's shadow lingered, poisoning every quiet moment. One night, as Madison dozed lightly, her phone buzzed. The new number wasn't supposed to be known, but somehow Jason had gotten it. His voice snarled through the speaker. "You think you can run? You think that billionaire is going to save you? You're mine, Madison. You'll always be mine." She dropped the phone, her body shaking uncontrollably. Michael stormed into the room seconds later, grabbing the device and barking orders into his radio. Madison curled against the pillows, whispering, "Why won't he just stop? Why won't he let me go?" Alexander appeared shortly after, his calm presence cutting through the chaos. He sat by her bed, his hand resting lightly near hers. "Bullies thrive on fear," he said gently. "Jason knows he's losing control, so he's trying to scare you back into silence. Don't let him. You're stronger than he is." But Madison wasn't sure. Every threat pulled her back into the nightmare, convincing her she would never be free. She worried for her baby, for Michael, even for Alexander. What if Jason's rage reached them too? She couldn't bear the thought of dragging others into her storm. Michael, however, refused to back down. "He crossed the line the moment he touched you," he told her firmly. "And now, he's about to learn what happens when he threatens a cop's family." That night, Madison sat awake by the hospital window, staring out at the quiet city lights. Her heart longed for peace, for safety, for a future where her child would never know fear. But Jason's voice echoed in her ears like a curse. She whispered to her unborn baby, "I won't let him win. Not this time." What Madison didn't know was that Jason's desperation was about to push him into an even darker plan, one that could put everyone she loved in danger. Jason Miller had always believed he could control people with charm and intimidation. That belief extended beyond Madison. For months he had been entangled with another woman, Vanessa Price. She was younger, glamorous, and eager for the lifestyle Jason promised her. To Vanessa, Jason was the man who whispered dreams of luxury, a man who swore he would leave his boring wife and start a new life together. But Vanessa was not stupid. She had seen Jason's temper, the reckless gambling, the desperate phone calls to cover his debts. When news spread that Jason had been arrested for assaulting his pregnant wife, Vanessa's illusion shattered. She realized she wasn't the chosen one. She was just another pawn. At first, Vanessa ignored his calls from jail, but Jason was relentless. "Vanessa, baby, don't turn your back on me," he begged over the phone. "You're all I've got. I'll get out of this, I swear. Just get me some cash, hire me a lawyer. We'll run away together." Vanessa rolled her eyes, twirling a strand of her blonde hair as she listened. "Jason, you promised me yachts and diamonds. All I've gotten is cheap dinners and excuses. Now you're in jail, and the whole city knows you broke your wife's leg while she's carrying your child. Do you really think I want to be tied to that?" His tone shifted from pleading to threatening. "Don't forget what you owe me, Vanessa. You think you can just walk away? You're mine, just like Madison." That was his mistake. Vanessa hated being controlled, and Jason's arrogance was the final straw. If he thought he could scare her into loyalty, he was dead wrong. The next day, Vanessa made a bold move. She reached out to Michael Hayes. Meeting him in a quiet cafe near the courthouse, she slid into the booth opposite him, oversized sunglasses covering her face. Michael, suspicious but curious, leaned forward. "Why are you here?" Vanessa smirked. "Because I'm done with Jason, and I think you'll want to know what I know." She spilled everything: Jason's gambling debts, the hidden bank accounts, his violent rants about Madison, even his plan to run away with stolen money once he bled Madison dry. Michael listened carefully, his jaw tightening with every word. The more Vanessa revealed, the clearer the picture became. Jason wasn't just abusive. He was dangerous on a level Madison hadn't even realized. When Michael told Madison later that night, her heart shattered all over again. She had clung to the belief that somewhere, deep down, Jason once loved her. But Vanessa's words stripped that illusion away. Jason never loved her. He had only ever loved control, money, and his own ego. Madison wept in Michael's arms, whispering, "How could I have been so blind? He wasn't just cruel, he was planning to throw us away." Michael held her close, his voice firm. "You're not blind, Maddie. You're human. But now we know the truth. And with this truth, we can finally destroy him." What none of them knew, however, was that Jason had already guessed Vanessa's betrayal, and he was plotting his revenge from inside his cell. The walls of Harris County Jail were gray and unforgiving, but the storm inside Jason Miller was darker than any cell. He paced like a caged animal, fists clenching and unclenching, his mind spiraling with rage. Losing control was something Jason never tolerated. Yet here he was, stripped of power, humiliated, and abandoned. Every night, he replayed the scene in his head: Madison screaming, Michael barging in, the flashing red and blue lights. He remembered the neighbors' eyes staring at him as the police shoved him into the back of the cruiser. Shame boiled into fury. "She betrayed me," he muttered under his breath, his voice low and venomous. "She thinks she can walk away? Not a chance." At first, Jason convinced himself it was temporary. He would get out, smooth-talk the court, maybe even intimidate Madison into dropping charges. But reality hit hard when his lawyer visited. "The evidence against you is solid," the lawyer said bluntly. "Your wife's injuries, the neighbor's testimonies, your prior record of disorderly conduct, it doesn't look good." Jason slammed his fist against the table, making the lawyer flinch. "I'm not going down for this. She's my wife. She belongs to me." The lawyer gathered his papers, unimpressed. "She's not yours anymore, and if you keep acting like this, the jury will eat you alive." The words cut deeper than Jason expected. For the first time, he realized people weren't afraid of him anymore. His charm, his intimidation, it all crumbled within these concrete walls. Even Vanessa, the mistress who once clung to his promises, had betrayed him. He had overheard whispers from the guards. She had gone to Madison's brother. Jason's stomach twisted with rage. In the cafeteria, other inmates mocked him. "A tough guy who beats pregnant women? Real brave, Miller," one sneered. Jason lunged at him, but guards dragged him back before fists could fly. His reputation, once built on fear, had turned into ridicule. He was no longer the predator. He was prey to his own disgrace. Lying awake at night on his thin mattress, Jason's thoughts grew darker. He blamed Madison for everything. If only she had given him the money. If only she had stayed quiet. If only she hadn't called Michael. In his mind, Madison was the villain, not him. The idea of her moving on, raising his child without him, was unbearable. His obsession festered until it consumed him. One evening, during visitation hours, Jason's rage boiled over. He was denied a meeting with Madison. She refused to see him. The guard told him calmly, "She doesn't want contact." Jason erupted, slamming his fists against the glass. "She can't do this to me. She's mine. Do you hear me? Mine. His voice echoed through the room, startling even hardened inmates. But deep down, fear gnawed at him. For the first time, Jason felt the crushing weight of losing everything. His wife, his unborn child, his mistress, his freedom. The walls weren't just confining him, they were closing in, suffocating him with truth. He wasn't in control anymore. And when Jason received word that Madison wasn't just healing but finding comfort in another man's presence, his rage twisted into something even more dangerous. The hospital room that once felt cold and suffocating slowly began to change. Madison noticed it in the small details: fresh flowers on her nightstand, soft music playing from a portable speaker, and the steady presence of Alexander Reed. Unlike Jason, who brought chaos and fear, Alexander carried calm wherever he went. He never overwhelmed her. Instead, he showed up quietly, sometimes with a cup of tea, sometimes with a book he thought she might enjoy. One afternoon, he read aloud to her while she rested, his voice deep and steady. Madison found herself lulled into comfort, not by the story itself, but by the sense of safety that surrounded him. "You don't have to do this," Madison told him one evening, her voice shaky as she adjusted her hospital blanket. "I'm not your responsibility. I don't even know why you care." Alexander leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Because no one deserves what you went through. And because I see strength in you, Madison, even when you don't see it yourself. Sometimes people just need someone to stand beside them while they heal." The sincerity in his eyes unsettled her, but not in the way Jason's glare once did. This was different. Madison wasn't used to kindness without strings attached. For so long, love had meant control. Apologies followed by violence, empty promises. Now, with Alexander, it felt like something foreign, gentle, patient, safe. Michael noticed too. At first, he kept his guard up, suspicious of the billionaire who seemed too interested in his sister. But over time, even he had to admit Alexander's actions were genuine. One night, Michael found his sister laughing softly at a story Alexander told about his clumsy attempts to cook. It was the first time he had heard Madison laugh freely in months. "You haven't smiled like that in a long time," Michael said later when Alexander had stepped out. Madison blushed, brushing off his words. "I don't know what you're talking about." But deep down, she knew exactly what he meant. Alexander's presence wasn't just healing her, it was reminding her who she used to be before Jason's shadow took over her life. The Madison, who dreamed of picnics, who wanted to decorate nurseries with bright colors, who believed love could be tender. Still, fear clung to her. "What if I'm too broken?" she confessed one evening as Alexander tucked a blanket around her. "What if I can't be the woman I used to be?" Alexander met her gaze with quiet conviction. "You're not broken, Madison. You're rebuilding. And sometimes, rebuilding makes us stronger than we ever were before." His words stayed with her long after he left that night. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering to her baby, maybe we'll be okay." For the first time, hope felt real, not like a distant dream. But outside the safety of the hospital walls, the world wasn't done testing her. Jason's obsession was growing, and Madison's fragile new beginnings were about to face their hardest trial yet. Because love may heal, but danger was already on its way back into her life. The cell was cold, but Jason Miller's mind burned with fury. Every hour he spent locked up only deepened his obsession. Madison was supposed to be his wife, his property. Yet now she was slipping further away, protected by her brother, and worse, finding comfort in another man. A billionaire, no less. Jason's pride couldn't handle it. The image of Madison smiling at someone else gnawed at him like acid. "She thinks she's safe," he muttered under his breath, pacing the narrow floor of his cell. "She thinks I'm finished, but she has no idea who she's dealing with." Word traveled fast in prison. Jason learned quickly how to buy favors. A cigarette here, a promise of cash there. Every debt he owed on the outside became leverage inside. He used what little influence he had left to gather information, to send messages beyond the walls. He still had contacts, people who owed him, people desperate enough to take his money. One night, sitting in the corner of the rec yard, Jason confided in another inmate, a wiry man with tattoos running up his neck. "I need someone to deliver a message," Jason said quietly. "I want her scared. I want her looking over her shoulder every second." The man smirked. "That'll cost you, but fear's easy to deliver." Jason grinned, though his eyes were wild. Money's not a problem. Not yet. He still had hidden accounts, scraps of cash Vanessa hadn't discovered. Enough to buy trouble, enough to make Madison feel his grip even from behind bars. Meanwhile, his phone calls to Vanessa grew venomous. She had betrayed him, sold him out to Michael. But Jason wasn't ready to let her go either. He threatened her, promised consequences. "If you think you can walk away, you're dead wrong. I'll drag you down with me." Vanessa laughed bitterly during one call. You're finished, Jason. Madison's stronger than you ever gave her credit for. And she's got people who actually care about her now. You'll rot in there, and no one will remember your name. Her words cut, but they also fueled his obsession. Jason wasn't going to be forgotten. He'd make sure of it. At night, he lay awake on his thin mattress, replaying his plans. Maybe he couldn't walk out of prison, but he could still strike fear. If Madison thought she could rebuild her life, if she thought she could move on with Alexander Reed, Jason would remind her that he was always lurking, always waiting. He whispered into the darkness, "She'll never escape me, not Madison, not the baby, not ever." And as he plotted, Jason's rage twisted into something more dangerous than before. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about destruction. And soon, Madison would discover that Jason's reach extended far beyond prison walls. The hospital had become a strange kind of cocoon for Madison Hayes. She was healing physically, her legs still heavy in a cast, but emotionally, the scars ran deeper. Every time the door opened, her body tensed, half expecting Jason's shadow to fall across the floor. Fear had a way of lingering, even when walls and police guards stood between her and danger. Yet amid the fear, Alexander Reed remained a constant presence. He never tried to erase her pain with empty promises. Instead, he listened, showing patience Madison hadn't experienced in years. Sometimes they sat together in silence, the weight of unspoken words heavier than any conversation. Other times, Alexander would share stories of his past, his failed marriage, his long nights of loneliness despite wealth and success. One evening, Madison finally spoke truth she had been holding in for too long. "I used to think I was strong," she confessed, her voice trembling. "But Jason, he took everything from me. My confidence, my laughter, even the way I see myself. I don't know if I'll ever be the same." Alexander's gaze softened, his voice steady. "You don't need to be the same, Madison. You need to be free. Free to rebuild, to find joy again. What Jason did to you doesn't define who you are. He tried to break you, but here you are, still standing. That's strength." Tears slipped down Madison's cheeks, but for the first time, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of release. She placed her hand over her belly, whispering, "I just want this child to know love. Not fear, not pain, just love." Alexander leaned closer, his tone almost a vow. "Then that's exactly what your child will know. I'll make sure of it." The sincerity in his words pierced her guarded heart. For weeks, Madison had wrestled with doubt, afraid to trust again, afraid that opening her heart would only lead to more disappointment. But in Alexander's eyes, she didn't see control or danger. She saw safety. She saw someone who valued her not as property, but as a person. Michael entered quietly, catching the tender moment. At first, his protective instincts flared. His sister had been hurt too much to risk being vulnerable again. But as he watched Madison smile faintly at Alexander's words, he realized something he hadn't seen in months: hope. Later, when Michael stepped outside to take a call, Madison turned to Alexander again. "Why me?" she asked softly. "You could be with anyone, someone whole, someone who isn't broken." Alexander reached out, carefully brushing a tear from her cheek. "Because you're not broken. You're brave. And because sometimes life puts people in our path, not when they're perfect, but when they need someone to believe in them. I believe in you, Madison." Her heart swelled with emotions she couldn't name. For the first time since her world had fallen apart, she felt the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by pain. But just as Madison began to let herself believe, a knock came at the door. A nurse entered with a message, her expression uneasy. "Madison, you need to know something. Jason hasn't stopped trying to reach you." And in that instant, Madison realized her battle for freedom was far from over. It was late afternoon when Michael Hayes walked into Madison's hospital room with a tense expression. He wasn't alone. Behind him, A woman in oversized sunglasses and a sleek black coat stepped inside, her heels clicking against the tile floor. Madison blinked in shock as the woman removed her glasses, revealing carefully painted makeup and eyes full of unease. "Madison," Michael began carefully, "this is Vanessa Price. She's connected to Jason." Madison stiffened, her breath catching. She recognized the name immediately. Vanessa was the mistress Jason had lied about, the woman he had promised the world to while tearing his wife apart. Madison's stomach churned with disgust. "Why is she here?" Vanessa raised her hands quickly. "Please, hear me out. I know you have no reason to trust me. I wouldn't trust me either. But Jason is dangerous, more dangerous than you realize. And if I don't tell you what I know, someone's going to get hurt." Alexander, who had been quietly near the window, stood protectively closer to Madison, his eyes narrowing. Michael folded his arms, keeping his cop instincts sharp. "Start talking," he ordered. Vanessa sighed, her voice trembling. "Jason's been planning something from inside prison. He has people on the outside, guys who owe him favors, guys who'll do anything for cash. He's been paying them through accounts I helped set up. I thought it was just about hiding gambling money, but it's worse. He's talking about revenge. He wants to scare Madison, ruin her life, even if he can't touch her himself." Madison felt the air leave her lungs. She had feared Jason's threats, but hearing Vanessa confirm them made the danger terrifyingly real. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, as if shielding her unborn child. Michael's jaw tightened. "Do you have proof?" Vanessa nodded and slid a flash drive across the table. "Bank records, emails, even recorded calls. I kept them. Insurance in case Jason ever turned on me. But after what he did to Madison, I can't stay quiet anymore. I'm done with him." Madison studied her carefully, torn between anger and reluctant gratitude. Vanessa had been part of Jason's betrayal, yet now she was offering the key to exposing him completely. Alexander picked up the flash drive, turning it over in his hand. "If this is real, it could bury Jason. He won't just sit in jail. He'll stay there for a very long time." Vanessa nodded firmly. "It's real, and he deserves every second of it." For the first time, Madison looked at Vanessa not just as the woman who had shared Jason's bed, but as someone who had also been manipulated, deceived, used. Different roles in the same nightmare. "I don't forgive you," Madison said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "But if you're truly helping, then maybe something good can finally come out of all this." Vanessa lowered her gaze, ashamed. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just don't want him to destroy you the way he almost destroyed me." But what none of them realized was that Jason already suspected Vanessa's betrayal, and he was preparing to make her pay the ultimate price. News traveled quickly through Harris County Jail. Jason Miller had ways of finding out things he wasn't supposed to know. Guards whispered, inmates traded information like currency. And when word reached him that Vanessa Price had been seen meeting with Michael Hayes, Jason's blood boiled like lava. He slammed his fists against the cold metal table in the rec room, drawing stares from other inmates. "That ungrateful little traitor," he growled. "I gave her everything, and she dares to run to them?" Jason's cellmate, a wiry man with scars across his knuckles, smirked. "What did you expect? Loyalty? She's playing survival, same as everyone else. You can't control her from in here." Jason's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "Watch me." That night, he used his one phone call. Vanessa picked up on the third ring, her voice wary. "Jason, you shouldn't be calling me." Jason's tone was venomous. "You met with Michael. Don't lie to me. Vanessa, do you think I don't know? Do you think I won't find out what you've done?" There was a pause on the other end before Vanessa answered, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm done being your puppet. You're toxic, Jason. You nearly killed your wife, and now you want to drag everyone else down with you. I'm not part of this anymore." Jason's laugh was cold, empty. "You think you can walk away? You think Madison's cop brother can protect you? You don't know me, Vanessa. I don't forgive, and I don't forget." She hung up before he could say more, but the damage was done. Jason's rage had crystallized into a plan. If Madison thought she had allies now, he would tear them away one by one, starting with Vanessa. Back in his cell, Jason scribbled notes furiously, passing them discreetly to an inmate with outside connections. "I want her scared," Jason ordered. "I don't care how. A break-in, a threat, a warning. Make her regret ever crossing me." The inmate pocketed the note, nodding slowly. "It'll cost you." Jason smirked, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Money's not the problem. She is." Meanwhile, Vanessa couldn't shake the chill of Jason's words. Though she had handed Michael the flash drive, she knew Jason wouldn't let betrayal slide. Every time her phone buzzed, every shadow outside her apartment, her heart leapt in terror. She had thought speaking out would free her, but instead, it felt like she had painted a target on her back. Michael noticed her fear when she came to the precinct the next day. "He called you, didn't he?" Vanessa nodded, her hands trembling. "He knows everything. He won't stop until someone gets hurt." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then we'll make sure it isn't you, or my sister." But Jason was patient. Rage gave him focus, and focus gave him power. From the darkness of his cell, he whispered a vow to himself, a vow that sent chills even through hardened criminals nearby. "If Madison thinks she can rebuild her life, I'll burn it all down first." The hospital stay was finally over. Madison was released into Michael's protective care, but she wasn't going back to the little house on Elmwood Drive. That place held too many ghosts, too many memories of pain. Instead, Alexander Reed offered a solution. His estate on the edge of Houston, a sprawling property with high walls, security gates, and peace Madison hadn't known in years. At first, she hesitated. Moving into the home of a billionaire felt overwhelming, like stepping into someone else's world. But when Alexander showed her the nursery he had quietly arranged, a soft pastel room filled with sunlight, rocking chairs and bookshelves, her heart cracked open. For once, the future didn't feel like a nightmare. It felt like possibility. Days melted into a routine that slowly healed her spirit. Madison sat in the garden with a cup of tea, Alexander beside her, both of them watching the koi fish glide across the pond. Sometimes they spoke of simple things, favorite movies, childhood memories, silly mistakes. Other times, silence said everything. Madison found herself laughing again, her laughter light and unguarded. One evening, as the Texas sky turned pink and gold, Madison whispered, "I don't remember the last time I felt safe like this." Alexander looked at her, his expression soft. "Safety isn't a luxury, Madison. It's what you deserve, you and your baby." Her hand instinctively went to her belly, feeling the gentle kick. "I want this child to grow up surrounded by love, not fear. I want them to know they're cherished." Alexander reached over, carefully taking her hand. "Then let's build that together." His words stirred something deep within her. It wasn't the dizzying infatuation she had once felt with Jason. This was steadier, stronger, rooted in respect and care. For the first time, Madison allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't just surviving, she was living. Michael noticed the change too. Watching his sister smile again filled him with relief. Still, his instincts as a cop and as a brother kept him on edge. "I don't want to rain on your happiness," he warned her one night. "But Jason isn't finished. He's dangerous, Maddie. Promise me you'll stay cautious." Madison nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. She knew Michael was right. Jason's threats haunted her still, lurking like shadows at the edge of every joy. That night, as Madison prepared for bed, she stood by the window, gazing at the peaceful estate. Alexander's home was quiet, the gardens lit softly by lanterns, the world finally at rest. She whispered to her unborn baby, "Maybe this is where we'll find our forever." But as she drifted to sleep, her dreams weren't entirely peaceful. Jason's face appeared in flashes, his voice, his rage, his vow to never let her go. And while Madison embraced hope for the first time in years, Jason was already putting his plan into motion to shatter it all. The concrete walls of Harris County Jail might have held Jason Miller's body, but his mind clawed for freedom. He refused to accept that Madison was slipping away, that she was building a new life with another man. Each night he lay awake, the image of Madison smiling at Alexander Reed burning into his thoughts. Obsession was his fuel, and revenge was the only destination. Jason knew he couldn't act alone, but outside those walls he still had influence. He had debts owed, favors to call in, and desperate men willing to do anything for quick cash. All he needed was one willing hand. That hand came in the form of Ricky Torres, a petty criminal with a rap sheet longer than his arm. Ricky had once played cards with Jason in underground games, losing far more than he could afford. Jason had covered his debts back then, not out of kindness, but to own him later. Now, later had arrived. Jason leaned across the visitation glass, his voice low but sharp. "Ricky, I need you to do something for me. My wife, she's shacked up with some billionaire, living in his mansion like she's free. I want her reminded that she's not, that she'll never be." Ricky shifted uncomfortably. "You're asking for heat, Jason. That's a cop's sister. Messing with her is suicide." Jason's eyes narrowed, his tone turning icy. "You owe me, Ricky. Don't forget who saved your skin when those loan sharks were ready to bury you. You think you'd be breathing right now if it wasn't for me?" Ricky swallowed hard. Jason had a way of twisting the knife. "What do you want me to do?" Jason's lips curled into a sinister smile. "Simple. Watch her. Make her nervous. A broken window, a slashed tire, a note where she'll find it. Nothing big, yet. Just enough so she knows I'm still out here, even if I'm locked up. And if that billionaire gets in the way, remind him money can't protect everything." Ricky nodded reluctantly. Fear and debt chained him tighter than bars ever could. Back at Alexander's estate, Madison was finally starting to feel like she could breathe again. She spent afternoons in the garden, evenings reading in the nursery, her brother and Alexander always nearby. But late one night, when Michael went to his car, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A jagged slash across one of the tires. His instincts screamed danger. He searched the grounds, flashlight scanning the shadows. That's when he found it. An envelope tucked beneath the windshield wiper. Inside was a note scrawled in Jason's messy handwriting. "You can hide behind walls, but walls fall. I'm still watching." Michael's jaw clenched. He stormed inside, showing the note to Madison and Alexander. Madison's face went pale, her hands instinctively wrapping around her belly. Alexander's eyes hardened, his protective resolve stronger than ever. "This ends now," Michael growled. "Jason may think he still controls you, Maddie, but he just made the biggest mistake of his life." Because Jason didn't realize his threats had only united Madison, Michael, and Alexander into a force stronger than he ever imagined. Vanessa Price had tried to move on after handing Michael the flash drive. She thought exposing Jason's secrets would free her from his grip, but freedom came with fear. Every time she walked down a dim street, every time a car slowed near her apartment, she felt his shadow pressing close. Jason might be behind bars, but his rage traveled far beyond prison walls. Her fears weren't paranoia. Jason had already issued Ricky Torres his next command. "She betrayed me," Jason snarled during a whispered call from the prison phones. "She ran to Madison and that cop brother. She thinks she's clever. I want her to learn what happens to traitors." Ricky hesitated. "Jason, she's not part of this anymore. Maybe let it go. Focus on your wife." Jason slammed his fist against the glass, his eyes burning with hate. "Don't tell me what to do. Vanessa's mine to deal with. Make her pay." And so Ricky obeyed. That night, Vanessa returned home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Panic surged through her chest. She had locked it that morning. She was sure of it. Slowly, she pushed it open. The lights were off, but on the kitchen counter lay a single red rose. Attached to it was a note written in Jason's scrawl. "Betrayal has a price." Vanessa's breath caught. She stumbled back, slamming the door shut, fumbling for her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed Michael's number. "He knows, Michael. Jason knows I went to you. Someone's been here. I don't feel safe." Within 20 minutes, Michael arrived with 2 officers. He swept the apartment, but whoever had been inside was long gone. He found the rose, the note, and fresh boot prints on the balcony. His stomach turned. Jason's reach was real, and Vanessa was the newest target. "You're coming with me," Michael said firmly. "You're not staying here another night." Vanessa's tough exterior cracked as she sank onto the couch, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought I could just hand you the evidence and be done. I didn't know he'd still haunt me like this." Michael crouched down, his tone softening. "Jason feeds on fear. That's all he has left. But we're not going to let him win. You're safer with us than alone." Reluctantly, Vanessa agreed. Michael drove her to Alexander's estate, where Madison was recovering. When Madison saw Vanessa step through the door, her guard went up immediately. But the fear in Vanessa's eyes told her everything. This wasn't the same confident mistress who had once stolen Jason's attention. This was a woman running for her life. "Jason sent someone after her," Michael explained, showing Madison the note. "He's not just after you anymore. He's lashing out at anyone who stands against him. Madison's heart pounded, her hand tightening on the armrest of her chair. Jason's hatred was spreading like wildfire, threatening to consume everything in its path. She had hoped exposing his lies would be the end, but now the danger was closer than ever. And as Vanessa joined their fragile circle of safety, none of them realized Jason's plan was building toward one explosive move that could shatter all of their lives. The day of the trial arrived with heavy clouds hanging low over Houston, as though the sky itself understood the weight of what was about to unfold. The courthouse buzzed with reporters, cameras flashing as they jostled for photos of the disgraced Jason Miller. He was led inside in shackles, his once confident swagger reduced to a scowl. Still, his eyes burned with fury, darting toward the people who had gathered to testify against him. Madison entered the courtroom slowly, supported by Michael on one side and Alexander on the other. Her casted leg made each step difficult, but her head was held high. For months, Jason had tried to crush her spirit, to make her cower. Today, she refused to bend. This was not just about her. It was about her unborn child, about finally breaking free. Jason sneered as she passed, muttering under his breath, "You'll regret this, Madison." Michael immediately leaned closer to his sister. "Ignore him," he whispered. "He's powerless now." The judge called the court to order. Witness after witness painted the picture of Jason's downfall. Neighbors who had heard Madison's screams that night, paramedics who had carried her broken body out of the house, doctors who described her injuries. Each testimony chipped away at Jason's facade, leaving him exposed as the violent man he truly was. Then it was Vanessa's turn. She took the stand, her hands trembling as she adjusted the microphone. Jason's glare cut into her, but she pushed past her fear. "Jason Miller promised me the world," she admitted, but behind closed doors he was reckless, violent, obsessed with control. He hid money in secret accounts, used it to pay men for intimidation, and when I tried to walk away, he threatened my life. The courtroom gasped as Vanessa revealed the red rose and the note Jason had left for her. The prosecutor held up the evidence, the scrawled handwriting undeniable. Jason shifted in his seat, his face contorted with rage. Finally, Madison was called to testify. As she took the stand, the room fell silent. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with every word. "I believed Jason when he said he loved me. I forgave him when he hurt me. I thought if I stayed, I could change him. But love isn't supposed to break your bones. Love isn't supposed to leave you afraid for your life, or your child's." That night, when he raised that pipe, I realized Jason didn't want a wife. He wanted control. And I refused to be controlled anymore. Tears welled in the eyes of jurors. Even the judge's expression softened. Madison's courage resonated like truth that could not be silenced. Alexander sat in the gallery, his heart swelling with pride and protectiveness. He had seen her at her weakest, but here she was, stronger than ever, refusing to be silenced. Jason slammed his fists on the table, shouting, "She's lying! They're all lying!" The bailiff restrained him, dragging him back into his seat. His mask of control was gone, replaced by the frantic desperation of a man watching his world crumble. And when the prosecutor revealed Jason's secret bank records, the ones Vanessa had handed over, the courtroom knew his fate was sealed. The courtroom was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Every eye was fixed on the jury as they filed back into the box, their faces solemn. Jason Miller sat rigidly at the defense table, sweat gathering on his brow. For once, his arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by the twitch of a man who finally realized he was cornered. Madison sat in the front row, Alexander on one side, Michael on the other. Her hands clutched tightly together in her lap, knuckles white. She prayed for justice, not just for herself, but for the child kicking gently inside her. The judge cleared his throat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." Madison held her breath as the verdict was read. On the charge of aggravated assault against Madison Hayes, we find the defendant, Jason Miller, guilty. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jason's face twisted, his eyes narrowing into slits as he glared at Madison. She sat taller, refusing to look away. On the charge of reckless endangerment of an unborn child, guilty. Madison felt tears sting her eyes. She gripped Michael's hand, her heart pounding with relief. And on the charges of financial fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy, guilty on all counts. The weight of the words crushed whatever fight Jason had left. He slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "This is a setup! They're all against me! I'm not guilty!" The judge's gavel banged sharply. "Order in the court." Bailiffs restrained Jason as he continued to rage, his voice hoarse. "Madison, you'll regret this. You can't take everything from me." But even as he shouted, his power drained away. No one listened. No one believed him. His words, once weapons, were now empty echoes. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Jason Miller, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 20. You will answer for your crimes." A heavy silence followed, broken only by the sound of Jason being dragged away in shackles. His eyes locked on Madison one last time, filled with hatred and despair. She met his gaze calmly, her tears finally falling, but not from fear, from release. For the first time in years, Madison felt free. Alexander reached for her hand, his grip steady, reassuring. "It's over," he whispered. Michael's voice was firmer. "No, it's justice. He'll never hurt you again." Around them, reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and whispers filled the room. But Madison didn't care about the noise. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, feeling the weight lift from her chest. Jason had lost everything: his wife, his mistress, his freedom, his power. Alone, caged, abandoned, he would spend decades haunted by the life he had destroyed with his own hands. And as Madison stepped out of the courthouse into the sunlight, she realized her true story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Months passed after the trial, and the seasons shifted. The chill of winter gave way to the warmth of spring, a season of renewal that mirrored Madison Hayes's life. Jason Miller was locked away, his voice silenced by concrete walls and iron bars. For Madison, each day became brighter, freer, safer. At Alexander Reed's estate, she found not just shelter, but a home. The sprawling gardens, once intimidating, became her sanctuary. She walked slowly along the stone paths, her hand resting on her belly, whispering dreams to her unborn child. For the first time in years, her words weren't laced with fear. They were filled with hope. Michael visited often, never far from his sister's side. His duty as a brother hadn't ended with Jason's arrest. If anything, it had grown stronger. But now his watchful eyes softened when he saw Madison laugh again, saw color return to her cheeks. He even allowed himself to smile when Alexander stood beside her, not as a savior, but as a partner who respected her strength. The day finally came. In the quiet of a hospital room, under the steady care of doctors and nurses, Madison gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she held her son for the first time, his tiny fingers curling around hers. The pain, the scars, the nights of terror, all of it seemed to fade in that single moment. Michael stood at the window, wiping at his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Alexander stayed close, his hand resting gently on Madison's shoulder, his eyes filled with awe as he gazed at the baby. "He's perfect," Alexander whispered. Madison smiled through tears. "He's free. That's all I ever wanted for him." In the weeks that followed, life blossomed in ways Madison had never dared imagine. The nursery Alexander had prepared came alive with soft lullabies, colorful mobiles, and the gentle creak of the rocking chair. Madison would sit there at night, her baby nestled in her arms, watching the stars through the wide windows. Each star felt like a promise of a future finally within reach. Alexander's role grew naturally, not forced, not rushed. He was patient, kind, and steady. A man who showed love not with grand declarations, but with daily actions. He changed diapers, sang lullabies off-key, and held Madison's hand during sleepless nights. Slowly, love bloomed between them. A love built not on control or fear, but on respect and devotion. Jason faded into the past, a shadow locked away where he could harm no one. His mistress had disappeared from the spotlight, and his name became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. Meanwhile, Madison's name became synonymous with strength. Standing in the garden one sunny afternoon, Madison watched her son giggle in Alexander's arms while Michael teased him with a toy badge. Her heart swelled. She had walked through fire, but she had not been consumed. She had rebuilt, not just for herself, but for her child. And as Madison whispered to her baby, "We are safe, we are loved, and we are free," she finally believed it, with every fiber of her being. All right, my friend, so the story has come full circle. And if you're still here, watching and listening until this very moment, then I know something inside this journey touched your heart too. Maybe it reminded you of pain you've endured, or maybe it gave you hope for the future. The truth is, life will test us, but as the Stoics remind us, we cannot control what happens to us, only how we respond. Madison's story shows us that strength isn't never falling. It's standing up again, for yourself, for your family, and for the life you deserve. Healing takes courage, and choosing love over fear is the bravest act of all. So if this touched you, do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who might need the reminder that they are stronger than their struggles. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the stories that remind us of our own resilience. Because together we heal. The night was supposed to be magical. An exclusive charity gala under the stars, the city skyline glowing in the distance, and the who's who of high society in attendance. Everyone was there. Everyone. Except the one person who mattered most to Scarlett Reed. Scarlett, 6 months pregnant and glowing in a champagne-colored silk gown, arrived at the rooftop gala alone. She tried to smile, tried to ignore the stares, the hushed whispers. But deep inside, something felt off. Her husband, tech billionaire Landon Reed, had promised he'd meet her there. He had texted her just an hour before. "Be there in 30. Can't wait to show you off, babe." But that was the last she heard from him. As she walked through the crystal-lit terrace, her hand instinctively resting on her belly, Scarlett caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. Nervous eyes, flawless makeup hiding the exhaustion of a complicated pregnancy, and a brave smile that was beginning to crack. That's when the photographers turned. The click of cameras was rapid, aggressive, like a warning. At first, Scarlett assumed it was for her. But the crowd wasn't looking at her. They were staring at the grand glass elevator that had just opened. Out stepped Landon Reed, arm in arm with a stunning woman in a blood-red dress. Scarlett froze. The woman was tall, with dark curls that cascaded over bare shoulders, and a laugh that echoed across the rooftop like a gunshot. She was half Scarlett's age and clung to Landon like a trophy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Scarlett stood in stunned silence as her husband kissed the woman on the cheek and led her past Scarlett without so much as a glance. He walked right by her, like she didn't exist. Her breath caught in her throat, her fingers trembling as she tightened them around her clutch. One of the guests, a woman she'd once considered a friend, leaned toward another and whispered, "Isn't that his wife, the pregnant one?" Scarlett turned away before she could hear the response. Her vision blurred. Her heels felt unsteady. Her baby kicked, as if sensing her mother's distress. She staggered back, trying to catch her breath. But the pressure in her chest was too much. The betrayal. The public humiliation. The realization that the man she loved had chosen this moment, this night, to parade his mistress like a crown. Suddenly, the world tilted. Scarlett collapsed. Screams erupted. The waiter dropped his tray of glasses. People rushed to her side, and the music screeched to a halt. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance." Scarlett's body trembled on the cold marble floor. She clutched her stomach, her face contorted in pain. "My baby, help, my baby." As the paramedics arrived and surrounded her, Scarlett drifted in and out of consciousness. She could hear voices, but couldn't focus on any of them. Her dress was soaked, her legs weak. Her baby? Was she losing her baby? Where was Landon? Was he rushing to her side? Was he pushing through the crowd, shouting her name, grabbing her hand? No, he wasn't. Because Landon was still standing near the champagne tower, watching. His mistress leaned in and whispered something in his ear. He smirked and turned away. He didn't run to Scarlett. He didn't kneel beside her. He didn't even pretend to care. Later, the security footage would show that Landon walked away just before the ambulance arrived. He left through the service elevator, left his pregnant wife in critical condition, alone. Inside the speeding ambulance, Scarlett gritted her teeth against the pain. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. "Please," she whispered. "Please, save my baby." The paramedic, a woman named Eliza, squeezed Scarlett's hand. "You're strong. Stay with me just a little longer." Scarlett blinked back tears. Her body was failing her. Her heart was broken. But something inside her refused to give up. This wasn't how her story would end. She had built Landon's empire beside him, helped write his first pitch decks, slept on an air mattress in their old apartment while he coded for days. She had believed in his dreams before the world even knew his name. And now he left her, bleeding, on a ballroom floor? No, not like this. Not ever. As the ambulance sped into the night, sirens wailing like a war cry, something shifted in Scarlet Reed. A spark, a flicker, a storm waiting to be born. The pain was still there, the fear, the disbelief, but alongside them now was fury. And that fury would change everything, because this wasn't just a wife betrayed, this was a woman reborn. And when she returned, she wouldn't be the same Scarlet who believed in fairy tales. She wouldn't smile politely while her husband paraded lies. She wouldn't be silenced by shame. She would rise. Scarlet Reed was not just another heartbroken woman in the headlines. She was the story. And the world had no idea what was coming next. Before the flashing cameras and shattered illusions, before the betrayal that shook the entire gala, Scarlet Reed was known for one thing, her grace. Not beauty, not wealth, not ambition. Grace. She had the kind of presence that didn't need sequins or red carpets. People noticed her because she listened, because she remembered birthdays, because she brought warmth into cold boardrooms and asked the assistant's name when no one else did. At 32, Scarlet was the kind of woman people underestimated until they couldn't. Born in a quiet suburb outside Seattle, Scarlet was raised by her grandmother, a retired teacher with a steel spine and a soft heart. Her mother had passed when she was 7. Her father was never in the picture. Life didn't hand her anything on a silver platter, so she built her own. She paid her way through college, waitressing at night and studying business administration by day. Not because she wanted to be rich, but because she wanted freedom. Freedom to choose who she'd become. Freedom to never depend on anyone. Scarlet never sought the spotlight. She wore department store blouses, never posted selfies, and thought luxury was Sunday mornings with a cup of coffee and no emails. She didn't dream of fame. She dreamed of peace. And then came Landon. She met him during her final semester at UCLA. He was 3 years older, already working on his second failed startup, charming the lecture hall as a guest speaker. He spoke about disruption, about breaking the system, about changing the world. He spoke like he meant it. After the talk, she asked him a question no one else dared. What if the system doesn't need breaking, just better builders? He paused, then smiled. Their story began with debates over coffee. He challenged her to dream bigger. She grounded him with facts and empathy. Where he saw markets, she saw people. They were opposites, but somehow they clicked. He asked her out 2 weeks later. Within 6 months, they moved in together. A year later, they launched his third company, together. Scarlet ran operations, hiring, and the books. Landon pitched to investors. He was the face, she was the foundation. They were unstoppable. And in love, or so she thought. Scarlet believed in loyalty. She believed in building something that lasted. So when Landon proposed on a rainy Thursday night with a handwritten note and a simple silver ring, she didn't hesitate. They got married in a small backyard ceremony. No glitz, just people who mattered. Back then, they didn't have much. Just ambition, sleepless nights, and shared dreams. Scarlet worked 80-hour weeks while pregnant with their first company, while Landon pursued meetings, funding, and headlines. She never complained, even when the IPO came and the world started calling him a genius, even when the mansion replaced their 2-bedroom apartment, even when strangers began to assume she was just the wife. She let it slide. She knew the truth. But over time, Landon changed. The man who used to read her rough drafts turned into the man who barely texted back. The man who once kissed her forehead every morning began to skip breakfast. He stopped asking about her. He stopped caring about her thoughts on anything that didn't end in dollar signs. Still, she stayed, because marriage is not a PR campaign. It's not about looking perfect, it's about enduring the imperfect. Or so she believed. Then came the baby. Scarlet had always wanted to be a mom. Not for the Instagrammable nursery or gender reveal parties, but for the real, messy, beautiful experience of raising a child with someone you love. At first, Landon was excited. He booked the best OBGYN in Beverly Hills, hired a personal chef, told reporters in interviews we're so excited. Fatherhood is the next big adventure. But behind closed doors, he grew distant. He missed appointments, spent nights at work. His phone was always face down, always locked. Scarlet felt the shift, like being left out of your own story. She never said a word. She wanted to believe it was just pressure, stress, the usual growing pains of success, until the night of the gala, the night her world cracked wide open. The night Landon walked past her like a stranger. That's when Scarlett realized she had spent years playing small so he could feel big. She had lowered her voice, dimmed her shine, disappeared into his shadow, all while carrying not just his child, but his legacy. But here's the thing about women like Scarlett Reed. They may be quiet, but they remember. They remember the sacrifices. They remember the broken promises, and when the time comes, they rise. Because Scarlett wasn't just a wife. She wasn't just a pregnant woman in heels. She was the architect of his empire. She was the brains behind his brilliance. She had files, emails, signatures. She knew things no one else did. Landon might have walked past her like she was nothing, but he'd soon learn what happens when a woman stops believing the lies. Scarlett Reed didn't need revenge. She needed a reckoning, and it was already on its way. The Bright Horizons Gala was the event of the year, an annual spectacle for the elite, the powerful, the painfully rich. Held at the Grand Monarch Hotel, the rooftop terrace shimmered under a glass dome strewn with thousands of tiny lights, mimicking the stars above. The air was scented with peonies imported from Kyoto, truffle canapes passed around on silver trays, and champagne poured from a literal fountain. Every inch of the space screamed money. Old money. New money. Dirty money. This was where tech moguls mingled with actors, where oil barons shook hands with senators, and where influencers faked smiles for brands they'd never use. It wasn't just a gala, it was theater. Every dress, every nod, every glass clinked was part of a carefully choreographed dance, designed to impress, intimidate, and influence. Scarlett had been to dozens of these events over the years. She helped build Landon's public image, attended networking luncheons, and hosted investors in their home. She knew how to work a room, knew what to wear, when to speak, when to disappear. But this year, everything was different. She was pregnant, visibly, and tired. She hadn't wanted to go. The baby had been restless all day, her back hurt, and the idea of standing in heels for hours surrounded by people pretending to care made her stomach turn. But Landon insisted. "It's important," he said that morning, barely looking up from his phone. "We can't have people whispering that you've vanished." So she went. She had her stylist steam a gown that still fit. Barely. A soft champagne silk with a cascading empire waist. She chose pearl earrings instead of diamonds. Did her own hair. Applied just enough blush to hide the nausea. She walked into that ballroom with her head held high. At first everything felt normal. She greeted familiar faces. Donors, CEOs, a senator's wife she'd once played tennis with. Everyone smiled politely, said the same thing. "You look amazing, Scarlett." Glowing. She smiled back, like a robot. She looked for Landon. He wasn't there yet. People asked where he was, and she repeated the rehearsed line, "He's finishing up a call with investors. He'll be here soon." She took a glass of water from a passing waiter and found a quiet spot near the balcony. The skyline of Los Angeles stretched endlessly before her, glittering like the surface of a dream. Below, the city kept moving. Above, the elite drank and lied. And then it happened. The elevator chimed. Slowly, gracefully, the glass doors parted. Landon stepped out. The room shifted. People turned. Scarlett saw it before she understood it. The red, the dress, the woman. She didn't need to ask who she was. The way Landon stood next to her, arm around her waist, hand resting on her hip, smile wide and unbothered, told the whole story. Her name was Kendra Vale. A former model, current lifestyle advisor, and influencer with over 2 million followers. She was half Scarlett's age and known for posting photos in luxury resorts tagged self-made. Despite being sponsored by every man she dated, whispers erupted around the room. "Oh my God, is that his wife?" "No, that's not Scarlett." "Isn't Scarlett pregnant?" Scarlett stood frozen, her water glass trembling in her hand. She watched as Landon laughed with Kendra, accepted handshakes from board members, posed for photos like nothing was wrong, like she didn't exist. He didn't even glance in her direction. That was the moment. Not when he kissed Kendra's cheek. Not when she touched his chest and leaned into him. Not even when he introduced her to investors as his partner. No, it was when he ignored her completely, as if she were invisible, that Scarlett's heart broke in a new way. Not from love, from realization. Landon Reed didn't just betray her, he erased her. She backed away from the balcony, breath catching in her throat. Her stomach twisted. The pain was sudden, sharp. The baby kicked. Something was wrong. She tried to speak but couldn't. The lights blurred. The chatter turned to static. She clutched her stomach and stumbled. That's when she collapsed. A gasp ran through the room. Scarlett's body hit the marble floor with a sickening thud. Her purse flew from her hand. Her gown soaked quickly in blood. Guests screamed. A woman fainted. Men backed away as if fear were contagious. Waiters dropped trays. The music stopped. "Call an ambulance." Someone knelt beside her. A stranger, a doctor maybe. Scarlett was semi-conscious. She heard voices. "She's pregnant." "Oh God, how far along?" "6 months, I think." Her lips moved. "Barely. My baby. Save." As the medics arrived, Landon still hadn't moved. He stood near the champagne tower, Kendra whispering something in his ear. He didn't even look. He didn't run. He didn't kneel. He turned and walked away, left the gala, left his wife, left his unborn child. 42 floors below, Scarlett was loaded into the ambulance. Her hands gripped her belly. Her eyes fluttered shut, but something inside her stayed awake. A fire. This was no longer just about betrayal. This was about survival. Scarlett Reed had walked into that gala as a woman trying to hold her family together. She would leave it as a woman with nothing left to lose. And that kind of woman? She's the most dangerous of all. Landon Reed didn't start out as a villain. He started as a dreamer. Born to a middle-class family in Arizona, he was the youngest of 3 and the only boy. His father worked construction. His mother juggled 2 jobs. Landon grew up watching people struggle, save every dime, and settle for just enough. But he wanted more, much more. From a young age, he knew the power of image. He wasn't the smartest in school, but he was charming. Teachers gave him second chances. Girls swooned. Adults believed in his potential. And Landon learned quickly. Confidence was currency. Appearance was everything. By 25, Landon had moved to LA and launched his first startup, a budgeting app that crashed within 6 months. But the failure didn't faze him. He pivoted fast, used his losses as a badge of honor, and started a second company. That one failed too. But each time, he learned how to talk better, look better, sell better. Then came Scarlett. She believed in him before anyone else did. She edited his pitches, cleaned up his messes, stayed up all night formatting proposals while he schmoozed venture capitalists at rooftop bars. She was the backbone of his early success. And for a while, he loved her. Not just for her loyalty, but because she grounded him. Scarlett reminded him of where he came from, and the man he once wanted to be. But that was before the money, before the fame, before the investors and Forbes interviews and private jets. As Landon's face started appearing in magazines and on tech panels, something shifted. The man who once counted every dollar now spent thousands on tailored suits and teeth whitening. He hired a personal brand strategist. His Instagram was curated to look effortless, but expensive. He started referring to Scarlett not as his partner, but as my wife, a title that sounded more like an accessory than a relationship. She was no longer the woman he brainstormed with on the floor of their one-bedroom apartment. She had become background noise, predictable, quiet, safe, and Landon didn't want safe anymore. He wanted power, admiration, aesthetic perfection. Then, like a storm in stilettos, Kendra Vale arrived. They met at a networking party for digital creators. Kendra was magnetic, confident, sharp, and stunning. She wasn't impressed by Landon's resume. She was impressed by his reach, his following, his relevance. That was what seduced him. Kendra spoke in headlines. She knew how to turn a champagne toast into a branding moment. She took curated selfies with his logo subtly in the background. She pushed him into rooms Scarlett never would have. Fashion weeks, celebrity fundraisers, yacht parties hosted by crypto kings. With Kendra, Landon felt like a god. And that's what scared him most. Because even though Scarlett had been there for the rise, she wasn't made for the top. At least that's what he told himself. She doesn't get it, he vented to his assistant one day. She still shops at places with coupons. The assistant didn't reply, just nodded. And so the emotional betrayal began long before the physical one. Landon started hiding messages, creating fake business trips, changing passwords. He told himself it was temporary, just fun, something that made him feel alive again. But Kendra knew how to play the long game. She made Landon believe that Scarlett was holding him back, that being a father would ruin his momentum, that he was meant for more. and she could help him get there. Slowly, subtly, Kendra erased Scarlett from his world. She threw out old photos, blocked Scarlett's name on Landon's phone during meetings, even encouraged him to attend therapy, not to fix things with Scarlett, but to justify leaving her. When Scarlett got pregnant, Landon panicked. He smiled for the cameras, told the press he was thrilled, but deep inside, he was furious. This wasn't the plan. A baby meant settling down, slowing down. It meant diapers instead of DMs, bottles instead of branding. Kendra didn't push him to stay. She offered him something else, freedom. "She'll be fine," Kendra whispered. "You can still be a great dad, later." And Landon believed her. He told himself Scarlett was strong, that she'd bounce back, that the public didn't need to know about their issues. But the truth? He didn't want to deal with it. He was too busy being the man Kendra molded, the image he spent years chasing. He had finally become the icon people wrote think pieces about, and Scarlett didn't fit in that frame anymore. That's why he didn't stop when he saw her at the gala. That's why he didn't kneel when she collapsed. That's why he didn't ride in the ambulance. Because villains rarely realize they're villains. To Landon, he was still the hero of his story, the man who built himself from nothing, the man with the brilliant mind and million-dollar smile. He didn't see the blood on the marble floor. He didn't hear the desperation in Scarlett's voice. He didn't care. Because narcissists don't grieve, they rebrand. While Scarlett fought for her life in a hospital bed, Landon updated his bio. While doctors fought to save the baby, he filmed a podcast about the mindset of winners. While the city whispered, Landon posted drone footage of him and Kendra drinking champagne on a helicopter pad. But what he didn't know, what he never saw coming, was that the woman he discarded wasn't just broken, she was building. And when she returned, it wouldn't be with tears, it would be with power. Because the story was never about him. It was about the woman he underestimated. It was supposed to be a moment of celebration. The Bright Horizons Gala had reached its peak. The live auction was in full swing. The jazz band played softly in the background, and the rooftops sparkled like a movie set. Scarlett had spent the last 30 minutes faking smiles and small talk, her feet aching and her stomach tightening. Where was Landon? She had texted him twice. "Are you here? Did you make it upstairs?" No reply. Then the elevator doors opened. She turned instinctively, expecting to see her husband, the man who promised to be by her side tonight. But what stepped out instead broke something inside her. Landon Reed, tall, sharp, confident, and on his arm, Kendra Vale. The woman was breathtaking, if not by beauty, then by audacity. Her crimson dress was cut high, dipped low, and screamed for attention. But what made Scarlett's breath stop wasn't the dress. It was the way Kendra clung to Landon like she owned him. And the way Landon let her. They walked in like a headline. Power couple arrives, and the crowd responded as expected. Gasps, double takes, whispers. Phones were discreetly lifted for photos. PR assistants tried to make sense of what was happening. Nobody had prepared for this. Because everyone knew Landon was married. Everyone knew Scarlett. And yet, no one stopped him. Scarlett stood motionless as the room seemed to spin around her. She could feel dozens of eyes bouncing between her and Kendra, comparing, judging, calculating. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, her child kicking lightly in response. A server passed with a tray of champagne. She reached out for the glass with a trembling hand, but pulled back. She didn't need alcohol. She needed answers. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. Scarlett walked, no, floated, across the gala floor, her heels sharp against the polished marble. Guests parted for her like waves. Some tried to smile, some avoided eye contact, but they all knew what was about to happen. Kendra saw her first. She turned, red lips curling into a smirk. "Oh," she said aloud, as if spotting an old acquaintance. "Scarlett, you look glowing." Scarlett's gaze didn't leave Landon. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like," she said quietly, voice trembling but steady enough to slice through the noise. Landon didn't flinch. "I didn't think you were coming tonight," he said. Scarlett's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's your answer?" He shrugged slightly, as if trying to remain neutral. "Let's not do this here." "Do what?" she asked, raising her voice just enough. "Acknowledge your wife or your child." Gasps. Again. Someone dropped a glass. A few turned away out of politeness or shame. Others kept watching. This was better than the entertainment. I didn't want to cause a scene, Landon muttered. Too late, Scarlett replied. You caused the scene the moment you brought your mistress to a gala I was co-hosting. Kendra stepped forward. I think you're being dramatic. Don't, Scarlett snapped, turning toward her. You knew he was married, you knew I was pregnant, and you still came here wearing that. Kendra blinked. No response. Scarlett turned back to Landon, tears welling in her eyes but refusing to fall. I stayed home for months while you traveled with her. I gave up my career, my identity, to build your company. I carried your child quietly while you chased hashtags and models. He tried to speak, but she cut him off. You don't get to rewrite the story. Not tonight, not in front of them. A spotlight operator, sensing something bigger than the event, subtly angled the light toward them. Now the entire room was watching. Landon shifted uncomfortably. Scarlett, we can talk about this. No, she said firmly. You don't get to talk anymore. And then, something inside her shifted. A pain, sharp, deep. She gasped, hand going to her stomach. The baby kicked hard. Her legs buckled. Scarlett? Someone shouted. She collapsed to her knees. The room erupted. Screams, running footsteps, someone calling 911. Blood pooled beneath her. The last thing she saw was Landon standing still, frozen, staring at her like a problem he didn't know how to fix, and Kendra backing away, as if being too close might stain her. Scarlett reached for her stomach. Please, my baby. And then everything went black. When she woke up, it was sterile white, beeping monitors, the scent of antiseptic. Her throat was dry, her head heavy. She tried to sit up. A nurse rushed over. You're safe. You're at Cedars-Sinai. You lost a lot of blood, but the baby's okay. Tears slipped from Scarlett's eyes. Relief, gratitude, pain. Is he here? She asked weakly. The nurse paused. Do you mean your husband? Scarlett nodded. No, the nurse said gently. He left before the ambulance arrived. He hasn't come by. Scarlett turned her face to the wall, and she knew this was no longer a marriage, it was a war. And she would not lose. The hospital room was quiet, too quiet. The only sounds were the soft, steady beeping of machines and the distant murmur of nurses at the station outside. The walls were sterile white, the lighting cold and clinical. But for Scarlett Reed, the silence was deafening. She stared at the ceiling, blank and unmoving. Her hands rested gently on her stomach, now swaddled in medical fabric and IV lines. The baby was okay, that's what they told her. Stable. But Scarlett felt anything but. She was numb. She didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't ask questions because there was no one to ask them to. Landon hadn't come. Not a call, not a text, not a single inquiry from the man whose child she was carrying. The same man who, just hours earlier, stood across from her in a room full of strangers and watched her collapse without flinching. The betrayal played over in her head like a cruel film on loop. His cold eyes, her blood on the floor, Kendra's smirk, the whispers, the pity in people's voices. Poor Scarlett, she didn't even see it coming. She looked so tired. She was tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing tired. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. She tried to sleep, but every time her eyes shut, the images returned. The sound of her own scream, the pressure in her abdomen, the feel of the floor hitting her knees, and Landon just standing there, like none of it mattered. The next morning, a nurse named April brought in a tray of oatmeal and fruit. You should try to eat, she said kindly, placing the tray near her bed. Scarlett didn't respond. April hesitated, then sat down in the chair beside her. You know, I've been working here for 8 years, she said softly, and I've seen a lot of women come through these doors, but not one of them deserved to be left alone, especially not like this. Scarlett turned her head slowly. Their eyes met. That's when the tears came. Silent, relentless, a dam finally breaking. April reached for her hand. I don't know your story, she said, but I know you're still here, and that means something. Scarlett sobbed. Not for Landon, not even for Kendra. She cried for herself, for the version of her that believed in love, for the woman who traded her ambition for his dreams, for the girl who trusted promises and waited by the door. She cried until her chest hurt, until her voice cracked, until her body gave out and sleep finally overtook her. Over the next few days, Scarlett remained in the hospital. No visitors, no flowers, no press statements. Landon and Kendra had gone silent on social media. No posts, no photos, no explanations. The media tried to spin it. Landon Reed attends gala alone, mystery companion sparks rumors. But insiders knew, everyone knew, And still, Scarlett said nothing. Her lawyers reached out quietly. So did her publicist. Her assistant offered to resign out of embarrassment. Scarlett ignored them all, because she didn't know who she was anymore. She wasn't a wife. Not really. She wasn't a CEO. Landon had taken over the business side. She wasn't even a public figure. Not the kind people cared to protect. She was just a headline. Billionaire's pregnant wife collapses at gala. Clickbait. Gossip. And in those long, lonely hours in the hospital room, Scarlett spiraled. She stopped eating, stopped responding. When the nurses spoke, she barely acknowledged them. She stared at the wall for hours. Somewhere in the background, the world kept spinning. News cycles moved on. Another celebrity scandal. A viral dance challenge. A tech stock crash. But Scarlett stayed frozen in time until the letter came. It was left on her bedside table while she slept. No name, no return address. Just a single cream envelope, sealed in gold wax. Scarlett opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten note. Scarlett, I heard what happened. I know you're in pain, but this moment is not the end of you. It's the beginning. Let them count you out. Let them mock you. Let them write your obituary, then rise. Because I've seen what you're capable of, and you don't need him. You never did. E.B. Scarlett stared at the signature. E.B. Ethan Blackwell. An old friend. A name she hadn't heard in years. A man who once stood beside her during the early days of Landon's first startup. A silent investor. A private billionaire who vanished from the spotlight to build an empire overseas. And now, he knew. He had seen. He still believed in her. Something inside her shifted. It wasn't strength. Not yet, but it was something. A spark. Scarlett folded the note and tucked it beneath her pillow. That night, she asked the nurse for a mirror. She hadn't looked at herself in days. The woman staring back was pale, hollow-eyed, worn. But there was something else too, a quiet fire. The next morning, she asked for her laptop. Then she asked for her lawyer because Scarlett Reed may have been broken, but broken things can be rebuilt. And this time, she wouldn't be doing it for Landon. She'd be doing it for herself, and for the child growing inside her. 3 days after Scarlett Reed left the hospital, the world still didn't know what she was planning. No paparazzi spotted her, no Instagram updates, no statements to the press. Her phone was off. Her apartment, empty. Friends and former colleagues assumed she was healing or hiding. But behind closed doors, Scarlett wasn't grieving. She was gathering. Every document, every email, every file she'd been quietly archiving for years. Scarlett Reed was not just the wife of a billionaire. She was the blueprint. And now the world would know. It started with an old external hard drive stored at the back of her home office, covered in dust, forgotten behind a row of business books. Inside were years of records, early contracts, investor decks, private emails between her and Landon during the foundation of Reed Tech. Documents that proved it wasn't Landon who wrote the first pitch that landed their seed funding, it was Scarlett. That it wasn't Landon who identified the original market fit, it was Scarlett. That the patent filed in Landon's name, she drafted the prototype, and she had the timestamps to prove it. For years, she'd kept quiet, out of love, out of loyalty, out of fear. But now, there was nothing left to fear. Landon had burned the bridge. Now she would use the ashes. Scarlett's first call was to her lawyer, Mia Sullivan, a shark in a silk blouse, and one of the few people Scarlett trusted without hesitation. "I'm ready," Scarlett said. Mia didn't even blink. "Let's take everything." They worked through the night. By morning, Mia had filed a motion to freeze several of Landon's shared assets. Not just cash, branding rights, IP ownership, licensing deals. Then came the emails, strategic leaks to industry insiders, whispering that Scarlett had been the real architect all along. She didn't need to go public. Not yet. She let curiosity do the work. Soon, people started digging. Forbes editors, business bloggers, Reddit threads. They uncovered old photo footage of Scarlett at early meetings, emails referencing her name in critical code decisions, voice memos where Landon credited her ideas. The narrative started shifting. She wasn't just his wife, she was his partner. Why did he hide her contributions? Then, on a quiet Thursday morning, the twist became public. Scarlett's name appeared in a leaked financial document, one showing she owned 51% of the original Reed Tech shares. Not Landon. Not the board. The shares had been held under a trust, quietly built and maintained during the early years before Landon's fame exploded. And now, she controlled it. Landon didn't see it coming. When his CFO stormed into his office and tossed the printed statement onto his desk, his jaw clenched. "What the hell is this?" "She owns controlling interest," the CFO said. "She's filed to reclaim her board seat. She's initiating a vote to remove you as CEO." Landon laughed. "She wouldn't. She already did." Silence. Landon sat down, stunned. She didn't know. She knew everything. Meanwhile, Scarlett was already 3 steps ahead. She flew to New York under an alias, stayed at a private residence owned by, of all people, Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire who had once believed in her before anyone else. Now he offered her more than shelter. He offered his network, CEOs, strategists, analysts. "I can fund your own tech group," he said. "Make you the face, build something that's yours." But Scarlett shook her head. "No, I don't want something new. I want back what's mine." That night, she sat in front of the mirror and did something she hadn't done in months. She smiled, not because she had won, but because for the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again. 2 days later, Landon held a press conference. He stood at a podium in his usual designer suit, fake humility in his eyes. Kendra stood behind him, silent but smug. "I want to address the rumors," he said. "Scarlett and I have chosen to take time apart. I respect her privacy. As for Reed Tech, I am still committed to innovation and leadership." The doors burst open, all heads turned. Scarlett walked in. In a tailored navy coat, no makeup, hair slicked into a bun. She didn't need styling, she was power. She stepped up beside Landon, whispered something in his ear. He went pale. Then she turned to the press. "My name is Scarlett Reed," she said, "co-founder of Reed Tech, former chief strategy officer, the woman who built this company while her husband chased interviews." The gasp. "I've been silent for too long, but silence doesn't mean absence. And from today forward, I reclaim what was taken." Reporters scrambled for questions. Landon stood speechless. Kendra stepped back, suddenly unsure. Scarlett finished with one final line. "I may have been written out of the first chapter, but I'll be the author of the rest." And with that, she walked out. Head high, baby safe, legacy intact. The day Scarlett Reed stepped back into the world, she wasn't the same woman who collapsed on a marble floor. The hospital gown was gone. So were the soft pastels, the hesitant eyes, the anxious posture. In their place stood a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece, with clarity, precision, and steel in her spine. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took weeks of silence, of reflection, of Leah. But it began with a choice. Scarlett didn't want revenge anymore. She wanted results. She started by reclaiming her identity. Not the version created by Landon's PR team, but the real Scarlett, the strategist, the builder, the woman who once helped launch a company from a kitchen table with nothing but a borrowed laptop and a $10 coffee budget. She restructured her calendar. No more open slots for other people's priorities. She changed her email signature. Founder, visionary, survivor. She hired a new stylist, not for glamour, but for armor. No more floaty dresses, no more soft wife aesthetics. Now it was tailored suits, monochrome power, black heels, minimal makeup, hair tied tight, revealing every angle of her face because she had nothing to hide. She even changed her perfume. No more vanilla. Now it was leather and oud. When she walked into a room, people felt her presence before she spoke, and when she did speak, people listened. Scarlett didn't return to Reed Tech with apologies. She returned with proof. She entered the boardroom wearing navy, holding binders, flanked by her attorney and 2 private investigators. Her tone was measured, calm, unshakable. "I'm not asking to be heard," she said. "I'm demanding to be restored." Some board members squirmed. Others stayed silent. But none of them challenged her. She had facts, receipts, and leverage. 2 days later, Landon was removed as acting CEO in a 5-2 vote. He didn't take it well. He blamed everyone, his staff, his assistant, even Kendra. But deep down, he knew the truth. Scarlett didn't just take her power back. She made it undeniable. Meanwhile, the world noticed. Women across industries started resharing her old interviews. Magazines requested cover shoots. The same bloggers who once called her just a wife were now labeling her tech's silent queen. Scarlett declined every interview request. Not out of fear. Out of focus. She didn't need to talk. She was busy building. With Ethan Blackwell's backing, she launched a foundation for women in entrepreneurship, starting with survivors of domestic manipulation, financial control, and high-profile erasure. She called it the Rewrite Fund. Its motto? Take the pen back. Within days, donations poured in, not from the rich, from everyday women who saw themselves in Scarlett, a nurse in Ohio, a startup founder in Berlin, a single mother in Brazil. They all wrote the same message. Thank you for standing up. But Scarlett knew this wasn't just about her. This was about changing the system, the one that made women question their worth when they stepped out of a man's shadow. She began speaking at universities, not about tech, but about rebirth. One evening, at a packed auditorium at Stanford, a student raised her hand and asked, what was the hardest part of starting over? Scarlett paused, then answered softly, letting go of the version of myself who accepted so little. Silence, then thunderous applause. After that, everyone wanted her. Panels, keynotes, investment forums, but Scarlett remained selective. Because for the first time in her life, she understood her value wasn't in her availability. It was in her vision, and her baby, her child, was part of that vision. She brought the baby to meetings, not to prove a point, but because she could, because motherhood and leadership were not opposites, they were power, multiplied. Meanwhile, Landon spiraled. His image took hit after hit. Kendra dumped him within a month, claiming she was manipulated. Investors pulled out. A Forbes article titled "The Fall of a Tech Icon" went viral, featuring a side-by-side of Scarlett's comeback and Landon's collapse. Public sentiment shifted. The man who once stood on magazine covers was now a cautionary tale. And Scarlett? She didn't say a word. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to, because power doesn't announce itself. It walks in, quietly, and takes a seat at the head of the table. One morning, nearly 6 months after the gala, Scarlett stood in front of a mirror in her Manhattan apartment. She held her baby, now smiling, strong, full of life. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled too. Not out of survival, but out of certainty. She had done it. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her silence into strategy, her wounds into weapons. Scarlett Reed had returned, but she was no longer just a woman recovering from betrayal. She was the storm, the system, the rewrite, and she was just getting started. The invitation arrived in a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold foil. It was for the Genesis Awards Gala, an annual black tie event where the richest of the rich toasted to their own greatness. Scarlett used to attend with Landon back when they were still seen as the power couple of West Coast tech. But this year was different. This year, Scarlett would attend alone. Correction, not alone, on her own. When she stepped out of the car onto the red carpet, cameras exploded in flashes. Reporters scrambled, nearly tripping over themselves to capture her entrance. Scarlett wore an all-black custom gown, sleek, structured, paired with stilettos sharp enough to wound. Her hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, diamond drop earrings grazing her collarbone. On her left wrist, no ring. On her right hand, her baby's name engraved on a delicate platinum bracelet. She didn't pose. She didn't smile. She walked with purpose. The whispers followed instantly. That's Scarlett Reed. She looks different. She looks like a CEO. Inside, the ballroom glittered with excess, champagne towers, live orchestras, chandeliers the size of cars. Landon was already there, of course, center table, surrounded by investors trying not to look nervous. He turned when he saw her. And for the first time in his life, he looked afraid. Scarlett walked directly past him, ignoring his stunned stare. She took her seat near the stage, next to Ethan Blackwell and 2 Fortune 500 female founders. Not a word was exchanged between Scarlett and Landon. Not yet. That would come later. Halfway through the evening, the MC took the stage. And now, the final award of the night, the Visionary Leader Award. For someone who not only changed the landscape of technology, but redefined what leadership looks like. Scarlett raised an eyebrow. She wasn't listed in the program. The MC smiled. This year, by unanimous vote, the board has chosen someone whose resilience, innovation, and impact has reached far beyond tech. A woman who rose from betrayal, claimed her place, and is rewriting the rules for everyone. Landon paled. Scarlett's name was called. The room exploded in applause. Landon didn't clap. Kendra, seated 2 tables away with her latest sponsor, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Scarlett stood and walked to the stage. The mic waited. The room fell silent. She took a deep breath and began. 6 months ago, I was lying on a hospital bed, bleeding, alone, betrayed. My marriage was collapsing. My name was erased from the company I helped build. and no one believed I'd come back from it. A pause. But pain is fuel. Silence is strategy. And being underestimated, that's leverage. Applause. I didn't come here to thank anyone for this award. I came here to remind every woman in this room, especially the ones who've been pushed aside, talked over, and written out, that your story isn't finished until you write the ending yourself. The crowd stood. Scarlett smiled. Rewrite it loud. Mic drop, standing ovation. But Scarlett wasn't done yet. As people returned to their seats, the screen behind the stage flickered to life. A surprise video began to play. Landon's voice, from a private boardroom meeting months ago. Scarlett doesn't matter anymore. She's just the mother of my kid. I'm the one with the company, the face. She can cry to her lawyers all she wants. Gasps, whispers turned to outrage. Scarlett didn't look away from the screen. She let the video play. Clips of Landon bragging to his inner circle, mocking her, laughing about the gala incident, even referring to the baby as a setback. And then, silence. Dead silence. Scarlett stepped forward again. That recording, she said calmly, was taken by a whistleblower on Landon's own advisory team. Someone who realized that silence enables abuse. She scanned the room. Tonight is not about humiliation. It's about truth. And the truth is, too many women stay quiet to protect men like him. Landon stood up. This is slander, he barked. You're done. Scarlett didn't blink. She turned to the crowd. Funny, she said. That's exactly what he told me. Right before I took 51% of the company. Laughter. Applause. Someone shouted, Tell him, Queen. Landon stormed out, but the story had already been rewritten. By morning, clips of Scarlett's speech trended on every platform. Hashtag Rewrite It Loud went viral. Women from around the world posted their own stories of betrayal, survival, and reclamation. The Rewrite Fund's website crashed from traffic. Book deals, TV offers, a biopic. Scarlett turned most of them down because she didn't need validation. She had her voice. And now the world was listening. Later that night, as she stepped into the back seat of her black car, Scarlett took a deep breath. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked. She looked down at her phone. A message from Mia, her lawyer, read, Board vote passed. You're officially CEO. She smiled. Home, she said, to my son. Because the real victory wasn't the applause. It was the fact that her baby would grow up knowing his mother wasn't broken. She was unstoppable. 6 months after the gala that changed everything, Scarlett Reed stood on the balcony of her penthouse apartment, holding her son in her arms. The city stretched beneath her. A skyline of lights, stories, ambition. Just like her. The baby cooed softly, his tiny hand gripping her necklace, unaware of the war his mother had fought to bring him into a world where she stood tall, alone, but never lonely. Scarlett smiled. She had survived the unthinkable. But more than that, she had transformed it. She had taken betrayal and built something new, a legacy, not one tied to Landon's name, her own. Scarlett had become more than a woman who was left behind. She had become a symbol, a movement, and not because she wanted it, because the world needed it. Her phone buzzed. A new article. Scarlett Reed named Time Woman of the Year. She put it aside. Awards were nice, but they were never the point. The point was rewriting the rules. And not just for herself. For every woman who had ever been silenced, sidelined, or shamed for believing in love, for daring to hope, for giving everything only to be left with nothing. She thought about that night, bleeding on marble, alone, how far she'd come, how far she still wanted to go. Because power, she realized, isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It moves with purpose. It listens. It rebuilds. At the Rewrite Fund's headquarters, hundreds of letters lined the walls. Stories from women across the globe. A girl in South Africa who left her abusive boss and launched her own jewelry business. A woman in India who took her ex-husband to court and won back custody of her kids. A single mom in Chicago who started a coding boot camp for young girls. They all wrote the same thing. You gave me permission to believe again. Scarlett didn't take credit. She gave it back. You had the strength all along, she told them. You just needed a match. I'm not your savior. I'm your reflection. She returned to the hospital where it all began, not as a patient, as a speaker. Standing before a crowd of nurses, doctors, and young women expecting their first child, she told her story, not with tears, but with triumph. Triumph. I thought I had to lose everything to find myself, she said. But I didn't. I had to lose what was never mine to begin with. Gasps, nods. A few wiped tears. One young girl approached her after. "How did you know when to stop forgiving?" she asked. Scarlet paused. "When I realized I wasn't healing, I was hiding." The girl hugged her. Scarlet hugged her back. She visited her grandmother's grave next, brought flowers, her baby, and a letter. "Thank you for teaching me what strength really looks like," she whispered. "You didn't raise a nice girl. You raised a woman who could walk through fire." The wind was gentle that day. Scarlet stood there a long time. No cameras, no applause, just the woman she was, and the women who came before her. Later that evening, she sat in her office, baby asleep nearby, writing her first book. Unwritten, How I Took the Pen Back. Not a memoir, a manifesto. Not about Landon, about life. Each chapter opened with a question. What would you do if no one told you no? No. What would you build if you believed you were worthy? What would you leave behind if you weren't afraid to be seen walking away? She didn't sugarcoat anything. She wrote about the blood, the fear, the shame, but also the fire, the strategy, the reclaiming. Because fairy tales aren't real. But reinvention? That's a story she knew by heart. Scarlet didn't fall in love again. Not yet. She dated. She laughed. She let herself be wanted, but not owned. Because love wasn't her ending. It was her beginning. And next time, she wouldn't shrink to fit someone else's spotlight. She would shine on her own. And as the seasons changed, so did the headlines. No longer scorned wife. Now it was visionary. Mother. Architect. Reclaimer. Scarlet Reed. She didn't respond to gossip, didn't clap back. She let her actions write louder. She let her silence be strategic. And when asked what advice she had for women watching her story unfold, she said only this. Never let someone convince you your story ends with them. Because it doesn't. It begins with you, with the woman staring back in the mirror, with the voice you're still learning to trust, with the fire you thought you lost. It was never gone, just waiting. Waiting for you to stop apologizing, to stop shrinking, to stop whispering, and to finally stand up and say, I'm not broken. I'm the author, and this story isn't over. Not by a long shot. So the story has ended. Our wonderful friends, are you still here until now? If you're still watching, maybe something in Scarlet's journey stirred something deep inside you. Maybe it reminded you of your own moments of heartbreak, silence, or being underestimated. But here's the truth. Your story doesn't end with betrayal. It begins with your decision to reclaim it. Scarlet Reed's story is not just about pain, it's about the rebirth that happens after the collapse. As the saying from heterodoxism goes, a wound is where the light enters you. Let that light in. Let it guide you toward becoming the version of yourself that doesn't shrink, doesn't apologize, doesn't wait for permission. If this story moved you, don't just keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And tell us in the comments, what are you ready to rewrite in your life? Your voice matters. Your story matters. Let's rewrite it. Loud.